Good to be in the house of the Lord tonight. We're going to look at page 353. We're going to sing Victory in Jesus. Page 353. And when you found it, could you stand with me, please? On this last song, we're going to have men come to receive our offering. But I want to mention a couple of things to you. Don't forget February the 16th, we have a Valentine event activity of the Agape Art Gallery to be here at Hampton Road, Independent Baptist Church for our adults here, and couples and singers as well. So if you come and just have a good time there. And we're going to eat. We have some food perhaps, so that'll be a good time as well with everything else that goes on. And then we're having a meeting, State of the Church address. February the 18th, I think this Sunday evening, 6 o'clock, to be here. And then we'll share some things with you about what I see is what my perception is of the state of the church, and God knows it better than I do. And that I pray that we'll be able to see some things that we need to do, and some observations that have been made from last year and even the beginning of this year, and see if God help us to have just a grand 2024. We know that the devil is always working to fight against the work of God, and we'll pray that God will keep us focused, and by the grace of God, we'll do what God tells us to do. And so that's all the announcement we have tonight, as far as I know. I do want you to pray for elderly, pray for those who are traveling, Miss Wanda, and then Miss Granville, and then also Jill is up in New York as well, and then pray for Pete and Miss Jewel. They also travel up to New York, so pray they will get back safely, and they're going to be well at time to get back. And the next week they'll be in the house of the Lord, and then as well, he said get baptized as well. So just pray God with all these details. And then let's sing this last song. You know, the last stanza, Rescue the Perishing, 447, I believe. And then the last stanza is our men to come. We're going to receive our offering, and then we get back to Elstock to come, and they will share with us what God has made. All right? Page 441, Rescue the Perishing. I should say one more time, get your blood flowing for the preacher. Rescue the Perishing, page 441.
Lord, for safety getting here, Lord, and thank you for what you have been doing in the house, Lord. Thank you for Dr. Elstock, Lord, and the wisdom you've given him, Lord, and the stuff that we learned. He's showing us this morning, Lord. I pray that you with him this evening as he goes to the slides, Lord, and show us more that we need to learn what's going on, Lord. So I pray to be with him, Lord, and pray that you just continue to bless our service. Be with this offering about to receive, that you use it for the name of God.
Well, tonight, since I got this thing streaming, we have again Dr. Mike Elstock, founded the Community Baptist Church in South Riding, Virginia, and he can tell the story about how they got there and all that God had to do and the miracle that it did for them to be there. And now that church is being passed by a young man that he trained and discipled and sent to the mission field. And Chris Sisler, I mean, I met Chris when he was about maybe 20, maybe 21, I'm not sure, but he and his wife Erica were not married at the time. And we got a picture back here of them when the kids were little. I think one of the kids on the picture is in college now, at least going. And so, but we supported them for a period of time, tried to help them out as we could, as God would provide resources for us. Years ago, in 2003, I think it was, Dr. Mike Elstock came. We were not in a permanent meeting place, but we would meet in the cafeteria area, and he came to preach a missions conference for us. And that year, our missions commitment went over, I think it was $103,000. We were a young church, and we were not that very old, and we had a good group of families in the work of the ministry, and they made a commitment, and that was the largest missions commitment we've had up to that time. And then since then, we've had one a little bit more than that, like $110,000 over the years. And of course, it's not that now, but God is blessed, and we've been able to give over $2 million in 25 years to world evangelization. And say, how you know that? Because I can go back and get all the financial records from our CBA, and it shows that this is what was given for missions. And I thank God for that. And I wish we could have done more. But we are praying that God will continue to use us to be able to reach people around the globe, and we want to reach folks right here in the Hampton Roads community. But we have a responsibility to reach the world with the gospel of Christ, and that's why one of the reasons why we're here and why God wants us to be involved in the work of ministry. But Dr. Elstock is a friend to me. He's been like I said, he's been a pastor, he's been a counselor, he's been a mentor, and I've asked him so many questions about so many things over the years. Just a phone call, I called him, he'll call me back if we don't get in contact immediately. He always calls back, always texts back, emails, and give me some reply, be able to get back with me. And he's giving me wise counsel about the local church ministry. I have a pastor, and I've called my pastor, but oftentimes I would call Dr. Mike Elstock to ask him a doctrinal question, ask him questions about ministry matters, just different things. And he's always giving me wise and right counsel, and I appreciate that. And when you're involved in ministry and you're learning and you're asking God for wisdom, God give you men and people in your life that'll help you if you'll listen to the counsel and you'll be willing to ask. And so I thank God for him, and he really has been a good friend to me. I appreciate your friendship, appreciate your love for me and my family. Appreciate your wife, Betty, as well, that she tolerates you, and I thank God how much she loves us. And so we're thankful for you. So you come without any further ado and present what God has given to you. Love you. Thank God for you.
The last thing he said about my wife tolerating me was the only true thing he said in all that statement. But all right is right. It's a joy to be here with you folks today. My wife and I have enjoyed the hospitality of your pastor and his wife, and just the provisions that you have made for us to be comfortable, to be able to be here with you. And thank you so very much for that. I'm going to try to bridge over a little bit of what we were looking at in the Bible study hour this morning that we didn't get finished, and bridge from that over to the subject matter, which was a short message that I wanted to share with you tonight. So I'll put the two of them together and make one long message of those two short messages. So before we were talking about Israel, the history of Israel, trying to understand. You can't understand today if you don't understand that. You don't know where you are until you know where you came from. And when October 7th occurred and that broke out, that whet my appetite to relearn and review and learn more about what's happened over the last couple of thousand years since Israel was driven off the land, off their land that God had given to them. The result of that was putting together a presentation I did back home in Northern Virginia, and then your pastor asked me to come and share some things with you about what I learned. And so we were in the process of that. We were trying to bring the history beginning 4,000 years ago up to the present. We got from 4,000 years ago up to 1920 to 1948. So we got pretty close to the 4,000 years of history taken care of this morning. But from 1948 to today, we didn't get to all of that. And so I just want to remind us that in after the First World War, the Ottoman Empire, which was a Islamic empire, the Ottoman Turks, the Ottoman Empire, was defeated in World War I, and the world powers that was the First World War, and the world powers that won that war and conquered the Ottoman Empire agreed that the lands that the Ottoman Empire had amassed, which was, if you look the Ottoman Empire up and see the land that they controlled, it was, of course, Turkey, above Turkey, and all the way down into the Middle East, quite a large swath of land that included Israel. And the powers that won the war agreed that the lands that the Ottoman Turks had won by conquest, by war, by colonialization, that those lands needed to be divided up and become self-governing states. And so they created a number of states. After the World War, when they were talking about how to create these states, they identified the land called Palestine. We learned where that name came from this morning. The Romans, in 136 years after Christ, named the land of Israel the land of the Philistines, as a rubbing in the face of the Jews, their greatest enemy to the south, the Philistines, where Goliath came from. And so the Romans named the land Syria Palestina. The Assyrian Empire to the north, the Philistine Empire to the south, Israel's greatest enemies north and south. They renamed the land of Israel to smear in the face of the Israel that you're no longer going to be back on your land. We're going to break the emotional tie between the Jewish heart and Jerusalem. And so they named the land Palestina, Syria Palestina. It's come down to us simply as the name Palestine. And so when the First World War ended and they were looking at the Ottoman Empire and how it was going to be divided up, they identified that Palestine needed to become the land of Israel. And Britain made a declaration, the Balfour Declaration in 1917, that they were in favor of and in support of an Israeli state so that the Jews could finally have a homeland. All the European pogroms that had decimated Jewish villages, the wars in North Africa in the Arab nations, abusing the Jews that were there, in Saudi Arabia, I mean everywhere, most of the world, the Jewish people had existed with anti-Semitism, with hatred, and with persecution for generation after generation after generation, going all the way back to the Romans 100 years after Christ. And so the British Empire and some of the empires that were on the winning side of World War I agreed we need to establish a place for Israel. And we learned a little bit about what had happened that resulted in that decision. So the decision was made. The map on the left shows the land of Palestine that was identified in 1920 at the San Remo Conference with the Allied nation leaders, that this is going to be Israel. But then they had so much conflict with the Arabs that the British never could make that happen. And it became a perpetual problem, this Arab-Israel conflict in Palestine, keeping them from forming the nation of Israel. So finally, Winston Churchill drew the line on the map on the right and said everything to the east of the Jordan River will become an Arab state. And they created Jordan. Everything on the left, everything on the right of the Jordan River, which was the east, would be Jordan. Everything to the left of the Jordan River, which was west, would become the new state of Israel. And so that was decided. and what was going to happen. So really what they did in 1920 to 1948, they were establishing a two-state solution. You hear them talking about the two-state solution as if it hadn't been done. It was done. They created the Arab state of Jordan, and they left the rest of the land for Israel. Now, that's, we looked at that this morning. That's just kind of bringing us up to speed a little bit. Let's go ahead and jump to that slide number 41. Go to slide 41 if you could, please. Slide number 41. In 1967, there were a number of wars after Israel was declared a state in 1948. Immediately, I'm sorry. Go back to slide 42, I think it is. Go forward one more slide. I'm sorry. Go to slide 37. I'm sorry. Slide 37. Slide 37 shows the state of Israel being declared a state by Ben-Gurion. The picture on the left, that was in 1948, actually. And then immediately the next day, 5 Arab states attacked the brand new state of Israel to try to drive them into the Mediterranean Sea and destroy them. That was the first of a number of wars that occurred during the time after Israel became a state, as the Arabs tried over and over again to destroy the nation of Israel. Now let's jump back to slide 41, if you would, please. After a couple of wars were fought, Israel miraculously won the wars, even though they were just a young nation without even an army starting out. The Arabs met, and this was the end of, I think, what we looked at this morning, about the end. The Arabs met in Khartoum, Sudan, and the Arabs issued what became famously known as the 3 no's. The Arabs, and it was the Arab League and a summit. It was the Arab leaders of the Arab nations met together, and they declared there will be no peace with Israel. There will be no recognition of Israel. And there will be no negotiations with Israel. The only thing they would accept is the annihilation of Israel. We will not have peace with her. We will not recognize she exists. Their maps in their school books in Arab countries show Palestine without Israel there. Israel doesn't exist to the Arabs. And we will not negotiate with them. They flat out rejected what they call a two-state solution. To this day, they call it a two-state solution. We've already got a two-state solution. We've got the Arab state of Jordan and the Jewish state of Israel. They want a 3-state solution. They want to carve the existing Israel into 2 states and make a second Arab state alongside Israel. But the Arabs don't want it. They have said for years, we will not accept your 2-state solution. We will only accept the annihilation of Israel. That's the only thing we'll accept. To this day, even last week, leaders of Arab nations said again, there will be no Israel. We will not accept anything except the total destruction of the state of Israel. That's the only thing we will accept, and we'll fight until we get that. And October 7th was only the first of a series of massacres to kill every Jew and to destroy the state of Israel. That's the only solution. That's why they call them Nazis. And that's why they have swastikas, a lot of them. Because Hitler's solution for the Jews, the final solution, was the annihilation, the killing, the murder of every Jew. That's the Arabs' desire. The Arab nations. The destruction of Israel. Now, let's go ahead to the next slide, please. Okay, there was a number of wars. Let me just mention these wars that occurred after. There was the Yom Kippur War in 1973. The Yom Kippur War was another war of Arab aggression to try to destroy Israel. Surprise attack on Yom Kippur exactly 50 days ago on October 7th. October 7th was the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War, planned to again annihilate Israel. Surprise attack on the Jewish holiday. Egypt and Syria wanted to capture the land they had lost in their previous wars of aggression. They crossed the ceasefire border lines. It was a war of aggression, but it failed, and no change of property occurred. Israel, again, miraculously won the war. Slide 43, there was a Israeli-Egypt peace. Finally, for the first time, an Egyptian, or rather an Arab state, Egypt, entered into a peace agreement, and Israel gave them the entire Sinai Peninsula that had become Israel's in the Arabs' war of aggression. And Israel gave it back to them on the promise of peace. Israel has given land for peace over and over again, and they've offered land for peace over and over again. And they gave back the Sinai Peninsula. They tried to give back Gaza, but the Egyptians didn't want it. To this day, Egypt doesn't want the Gazans. They know the Arabs in Gaza are terrorists. I'm not talking about just the rank and file people that live there. They know their problem, and Egypt to this day won't allow any refugees from Gaza to come into Egypt. They don't want Gaza. Back in 1979, Israel tried to give Gaza back as a part of the Sinai Peninsula to trade land for peace. Egypt said, we'll take the Sinai Peninsula, but you keep Gaza for yourself. We won't take them. And so, again, another effort, land for peace. This time, the first time, there was a successful peace treaty that was made, and there was peace between Egypt and Israel. Slide 44 gives just a series of maps. This just summarizes the changes in land between 1948 and 1979 and as a result of the Arab wars of aggression. You see that in 1948, when Israel became a state and 5 Arab nations attacked them, Israel won. What's in white and green added together is Israel. But what's in green is the part of Israel that was occupied by the Egyptians and Jordanians at the end of the war, after they signed the armistice agreements and agreed to stop fighting until they come up with a final solution. The Jordanians maintained a presence in Samaria and Judea, or what they called, renamed the West Bank, and the Egyptians remained in Gaza. This was back in 48, and occupied that land. So the Jordanians and the Egyptians were occupying Israeli land at the end of the 1948 war. Fast forward to the second map, after the 1967 war, Israel got back the land from Jordan and from Egypt, and also got the entire Sinai Peninsula. After the Yom Kippur War, there was no change in land because, again, the Arabs lost. And after 1979 peace treaty, Israel gave Egypt back to Egypt, gave the Sinai Peninsula back to Egypt, and Israel is in white. They maintain the control of the land in white. That was after the 1979 peace agreement. So that's just a summary. Now, let's fast forward a little bit further. Let's go to slide 45. We have the Oslo Accords. These were in 1993. Now, what you'll see is a continual effort by Israel to make peace. Israel wants peace. That's all they want. They want to be left alone and allowed to live in their land. The Arabs want war. They want Israel annihilated. Prager University, Dennis Prager said the Middle East conflict is the easiest conflict to understand, but the hardest conflict to solve. What is the Middle East conflict? It's a conflict between two peoples. One people want peace. The other people want death to the ones who want peace. That's it. That's the whole Middle East in 2 sentences. If Israel, all of the terrorist organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah, the Palestinian Authority, if all of the terrorists laid down their guns and said, we'll fight no more, there would immediately be peace, and the Arabs would be able to live in peace, and Israel could live in peace. On the other hand, if Israel laid down her guns and said, we will fight no more, immediately there would be a bloodbath, and all the Jews in Israel would be murdered. Because that's the conflict between the Jews and the Arabs in the Middle East. Now, the Oslo Accord in 1993 was an effort of Israel to secure, to give up land for peace. It was Clinton that kind of moderated it. The Palestinian Authority was created. Palestinian Authority was created to govern the Palestinians living in Israel land, in what they called the West Bank. And so they created the Palestinian Authority, and Israel allowed the Palestinian Authority to govern the Arab Palestinians living in Samaria and Judea. Those were the Oslo Accords. Next slide. No, let me go back. There's a piece of information. It's not on the slide, but I've got to tell you. What slide number was that? Number 45. Slide number 45. Okay, no, that piece of information is on another one. That was an effort it failed. The Arabs wouldn't accept it. They didn't want anything to do with it. So Yasser Arafat wouldn't accept it. Fast forward to 2000, Camp David, Bill Clinton again, this time with the Jewish Prime Minister, Ehud Barak, and the same Palestinian Authority, Yasser Arafat, and Israel again offered land. Israel offered all of Gaza, 94% of Samaria and Judea, with East Jerusalem as its capital. Israel offered to give the Palestinian Arabs all of that land for them to have a separate state, a two-state solution for them to have the land. Arafat rejected the offer. We will not accept the land. We don't want a two-state solution because we don't want Israel to exist. There's only a one-state solution, and that's everything under Arab domination with no Jews present. Arafat rejected. He went home and he launched waves of suicide bombers into Israel that murdered over 1,000 Israelis. Suicide bombers launched from the West Bank into Israel to murder Israelites. Please, that was in 2000. 2005, another attempt to give land for peace. This time the president was Bush the Younger. And Ariel Sharon was the Israeli prime minister. And encouraged by U.S. President George W. Bush, the Israelis forced all the Jews in the Gaza to vacate and move out of their homes. We're talking about families who had lived for generations. The Gaza is Israel's land. Jews had lived there for generations. And the Israeli government, the IDF, had to go in and force, and I understand bulldoze homes of Jewish families who had lived there for generations because they were pulling every Jew out of Gaza so they could give the Gaza Strip to the Arab Palestinians, and they were told, you have your own government, you form your own society, you build your own paradise, just let us live in peace and don't bomb us. And in 2005, that was accomplished, and the Palestinian Authority took over the governing of the Arab Palestinians with not one Jew present. Every Jew taken out by force of the Jewish government. And so in 2005, the Palestinian Authority took over, and in 2 years later, in 2007, the Palestinian Authority had a free election in Gaza where all the Palestinian Arabs in Gaza could elect their government. And they had two choices. They could elect the Palestinian Authority, which had been governing them for the last 2 years, or they could elect Hamas, a terrorist organization. They overwhelmingly elected Hamas. They wanted the terrorist organization to be their government. And so they elected Hamas in 2007. And from 2007 until 2023, billions of dollars have poured into Hamas's hands from America, from Europe, from the countries of the world, have poured humanitarian aid into the hands of the Hamas government to use to build a paradise on the Mediterranean Sea where the Arab Palestinians could live in paradise. Instead, they built tunnels and built and bought weapons. And since 2007, they have constantly bombed the civilian population of Israel. They've not been successful because the Israelis have some pretty sophisticated weaponry that meets their missiles in the air and explodes their missiles up in the air. So few of their missiles have actually hit civilian areas in Israel, but some have, and they live under the constant threat. They say in Israel, particularly in southern Israel, if you hear an air raid, you've got 10 seconds to get in a bomb shelter. The Gaza is so close, you've got 10 seconds to get your kids into a bomb shelter before the bomb could potentially hit your city. They have lived that way. The Israelis have lived that way since 2007. And so the 2005 was another attempt. The picture was a picture of an Israeli dad who had his home taken away from him by his own government and forced to leave his homeland, Israel, the Gaza Strip portion of Israel. It was a horrible day for the Israeli people when our president pushed Israel to give up land for peace. Our president continually talks about a two-state solution, in spite of the fact that the Arabs have said, we don't want a two-state solution. We want Israel dead. And we will not accept no negotiations, no peace, no recognition of your state. The Arabs have said that all along. Our news broadcasters won't, our president won't even admit it. But that's the reality of history. Next slide, please. 2008, the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, Israel again attempted to get the Palestinian Arabs to establish an Arab state. This time it was still Ehud Olmert, offered to the the Palestinian Authority leader, that guy, Abbas. They offered him Gaza, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and more. The U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice called Olmert's offer amazing. She said that the Jews would give up all of that. You look on a map, how much of the country of the state of Israel that is. Condoleezza Rice said that was an amazing offer. All the Jews want is peace, and they will give up land to get that peace. But Abbas rejected the land for peace again in 2008. Next slide, please. 2009, again, the Arabs met in a Fatah conference and declared another set of famous 3-no statements. They said in 2009, no negotiations with Israel, no recognition of Israel as a Jewish state, and no end of armed struggle against Israel. They stated their goal was the total annihilation of the Jews and the Jewish state. They want no other solution. They will push Israel into the sea, and Israel will be no more. It's the final solution of Hitler that will be accomplished. By the way, you go back in history, the Palestinian Arabs and the Arab countries around Palestine met with Hitler, and they worked with Hitler to find a final solution to destroy all Jewish people. That's why they call the Palestinian Arabs Nazis. To this day, they're called Nazis. And sometimes they are happy to take that name, and they'll put swastikas. I saw a picture today on a news broadcast in a rally, pro-Palestinian rally. A guy had his phone up, and on the screen was a swastika. They are Nazis, and they are proud of it because they want to destroy Israel. They say in their publications, Hitler's only failure was that he was stopped too soon. And we want to finish what Hitler tried to accomplish. So that was in 2009. Next slide. Now, here's recent history. This is what brings us up to the present. Here's what we hear on university campuses across America, across Europe, liberal politicians, news broadcasts. We hear that Israel is occupying the Arabs' land, which historically is laughable. The Arabs never had that land. The Arabs are occupying Israel's land in the West Bank and in the Gaza. Israel's not occupying the Arabs' land. They say Israel stole Arabs' land and put the Arabs in refugee camps. If Israel would only let the refugees, the Arab refugees, have an Arab state, there would be peace. We've already noted that the Arab leaders said they will reject that. They only want the murder of the Jews. We hear that Palestinian Arabs are being oppressed by Israel. They have no choice but to fight. That's what South Africa said the last couple of weeks. The president of South Africa, I listened to him on broadcast. He said that the problem, the reason for October 7th was the Israelis. The Israelis have oppressed the Arabs and oppressed the Arabs and oppressed the Arabs. An oppressed person has no recourse but to fight. And he said the Arab Palestinians have done what is reasonable and right, is to rise up and fight against their oppressors. That's the news line in today's recent history. Next slide. Here's the Jews are colonizers, taking Arab land by force. We noted, I showed you a map this morning, that the Islamic religion is the greatest colonizer in the history of humanity. Israel has never colonized, but the Arabs have colonized a great part of the world. Another one, let's go back again. Another statement, from the river to the sea, Palestine to the sea. Have you heard that? Chanted on college campuses, on pro-Palestinian rallies. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. What river are they talking about? I've watched news broadcasters, news correspondents on college campuses at pro-Palestinian riots asking pro-Palestinian rioters who are carrying signs that say, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And they put a microphone to their mouth. They said, what river are you talking about? The Nile? Have no clue. What sea are they talking about? Are you talking about? What sea are you talking about? The Black Sea? The Dead Sea? What does the sign mean? What does the statement mean? I don't know. I've seen a couple of real honest university students. They said, I don't know. I just got it from that stand over there and they told me to hold it up while I walk. I have no clue what I'm trying to stand for and articulate. I have no clue what it means. I'm just carrying the sign they told me to carry. I'm just spouting off the talking points. I don't have a brain. I haven't a clue. I don't know anything about history. All I can do is repeat the talking points that the liberals told me to repeat. We're in a mess because we don't have any truth in the minds of the people that are spouting what they're saying. By the way, the river is the Jordan River. The sea is the Mediterranean Sea. And the cry, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, means what the Palestinian Arabs and the Arab states have said all along for 100 years. They've said, from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, Palestine will be free of all Jews. We're going to push all of the Jews into the Mediterranean Sea. We're going to drown them. We're going to remove them from Palestine. And Palestine will be free of any Jewish people. It's the annihilation. It's the genocide of the Jewish people. And that's what they're advocating and crying for in their pro-Palestinian marches. And people don't even have a clue what they're saying. Palestinian babies are as precious as Jewish babies is another statement. Why do they say that? Because the news broadcasters tell them that the IDF is bombing Gaza and babies are dying. And Israel doesn't care about Palestinian babies. And they say, well, the Palestinian babies are just as valuable as the Jewish babies that were killed on October 7th. Next slide, please. Now let's take a look at this a little bit. Israel is occupying Arabs' land. That's what they say. No, the truth of history is that the Arabs are occupying Israel's land. And we built that case all the way through this morning in the Bible study hour. Next slide, please. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Next slide. That's a cry for genocide. The genocide of the Jewish people and destruction of the Jewish state. From the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, Israel. Palestine will be free of Jews. Next slide. Here's a Jackson Hinkle. This was a post on one of the social media, and that was picked up by Amar Sarfati, and on October or November 26th. He said Jason Hinkle's one of the most known anti-Semites on Twitter. He posted this coin. Here's a coin. Now notice, look at the coin for a minute. What is the big word on the coin? Palestine. What's the date on the coin? 1927 is before Israel became a nation in 1948. Here's a coin. Palestine, 1927. Jason Hinkle posted that picture with a statement on social media. See, Palestine existed before Israel. Israel didn't exist till 1948. They have no concept of Israel existing before 1948. That's why I said this morning when we started, I said if you have a secular worldview, you start talking about this problem from 100 years ago. If you have a biblical worldview, you start talking about this problem from 4,000 years ago. Jason Hinkle has no concept of Israel existing before 1948, and this coin was his proof. Palestine. It was Palestine in 1927. But what he didn't know Hebrew. There's a phrase right under the word Palestine. That's Hebrew. Jason Hinkle put a picture out trying to say Israel didn't exist before 1948, and he put a picture out of a coin that said Palestine, and in the Hebrew phrase it says the land of Israel. That's God for you, is right. That good? Yeah. By the way, you know, the word Palestine, as we learned this morning, just had to do with the land. Anyone that lived in that land were called Palestinians. When there was 100,000 Jews in Palestine, at the end, as a result of the end of the 1800s, we talked about this morning, when the migration of Jews back to Palestine began in the late 1800s, and I can't remember what the date was. It was 19 something, early, well before the world wars and all. There were over 100,000 Jews living in Palestine. You know what they called themselves? They called themselves Palestinians because they lived in Palestine. That was the land that the Romans had named it. They were Jews. They called themselves Palestinians. And at that time, when there was an effort to call the Arabs Palestinians, the Arabs living in the land said, don't call us that. We are not Palestinians. The narrative of the Palestinian Arabs being the real Palestinians who have always lived there, and the Jews came and stole their land, that's all lies. That's a made-up story to try to build a political idea in the minds of people. The reality is, the Jews living in Palestine called themselves Palestinians. And others called the Jews Palestinians. The Jews owned a newspaper in Jerusalem. It was a Jewish newspaper owned by a Jewish family, publishing news for the Jewish people in Palestine. You know what the name of the newspaper was? The Palestinian Post. It was all Jewish. It was the Palestinian or the Palestine Post. This idea of Palestine being Arab is a made-up story to try to displace the Jews. Next slide, please. If only the Palestinian Arabs had a state, everyone would finally be able to live in peace. Oh, really? The Arab League countries are all in red. The little sliver of yellow is Israel. If only the Arabs could have a state, there would be peace. Really? Some said they don't want a two-state solution. We've already got a 23-state solution. One state for Israel, 22 states for the Arabs, and they're still not happy because the Jews have one state. And they're not happy till every Jew is a dead Jew. And there is no Israeli state. Next slide, please. Palestinian kids are as precious as Jewish kids. Here's a famous picture of a little Jewish boy and a little Palestinian boy in Palestine. And the Jews respond to that statement, the Palestinian kids are as precious as the Jewish kids. The Jews say, well, yes, that's why, and your pastor mentioned this morning, that's why we bring both of them into Israeli hospitals and save their lives equally every day. Do you realize that in the years prior to October 7th, Jewish families drove into the Gaza, picked up Arab families, and took them to jobs? They had work permits to work in Israel. Israel welcomed them to come and work. Israeli families transported them to their jobs, let them stay in their homes. And you know what the Jewish people found out in the war after October 7th? They found the documentation of all of those Arabs that were being brought into Israel. They found how they mapped out the homes, identified where the Jews were, taken copious notes, and came back and constantly fed them into Hamas. So Hamas could plan the detail of how to rape every woman and burn every child, cut off heads and massacre the civilian population. How did they have the information to do that? It was the innocent Gazans that they gave transportation into Israel and gave them jobs so they could have a means to supply their own needs. Because Hamas wouldn't supply the needs of their own people. Yes, Palestinian children are precious. And Jewish hospitals have saved the lives of countless Palestinian children for free. There's not one hospital in an Arab country that's ever saved the life of a Jewish child. Saved the lives of Palestinian children, Arab children all the time. I read the report of one child that was dying, and the Israelis took the child into the hospital. They performed a life-saving surgery. The child's life was spared, and the mother was interviewed, and they asked the mother, when your son grows up, what do you want your son to become? She said, I want my son to become a martyr for Allah. Thank you, Israel, for saving my son's life. I'll do my best to raise a martyr to kill your children. Oh, if people would only read history and understand what's going on. Hamas, they don't love their own children. They use them as shields for bombs. They don't love Jewish children. They massacre them. But Israel loves all children. And they do everything possible to not harm a child in Gaza. And it's only the wickedness of Hamas, the Gazan people, that allow their own children to be killed in a war because they won't take their kids out of the shield to try to stop Israel from bombing their tunnels and destroying their armaments. The lies of our day today. Next slide, please. The refugee crisis. Here's the mantra. Israel created an Arab refugee crisis in 1948. 710,000 Arabs were driven from Israel when Israel became a nation, and they became refugees. That's the mantra. That's what's taught. What really happened? The Israeli government begged those Arabs to stay. Do you realize that today 20% of the Israeli citizens living in Israel are Arabs, most of them Arab Muslims? Do you realize that 20% of the citizens of Israel are Arabs? Do you realize they are doctors in hospitals? They actually, some of them are politicians in the Knesset, ruling in the ruling bodies of Israel. They're school teachers. Some of them are IDF soldiers. Arabs. Because Israeli begged the Arabs, don't flee. We're going to create a state, and you are invited to be a part of it. And you go to Israel today. I've been to Israel 3 times. I was supposed to be in Israel 2 weeks after October 7th. Obviously, our trip got canceled. If you go to Israel today, your tour guide will likely be an Arab who's an Israeli citizen, highly educated by the Israeli university system, and will take you all over Israel telling you how much he loves Israel. The Arabs that left, the 710,000 Arabs that left and fled when Israel became a nation, did so because the outlying Arab states told them, we're going to bomb Israel out of existence. You need to get out of Israel before we destroy Israel. And once we destroy Israel, you can come back and have your house back and have your property back. And the Arabs who listened to and believed the Arab nations that told them to flee Israel, they fled Israel. They crossed over into those Arab states. They were now refugees. And you know what the Arabs did in those states, the citizens, the governments of those states? They would not allow them to become a part of their country. They stuck them in refugee camps where they have lived in a human way since 1948. But it's not because of Israel. It's because Arab states won't welcome their own Arabs and allow them to become a part of their nation. It is not Israel that created the refugee crisis. And to add to that, the next slide, please. Here's a reminder of what happened in the Arab countries. The picture on the left, Israel in 1948, there were 156,000 Arabs living in Israel in 1948. Today, over 2 million Arabs are living. Over 2 million Palestinian Arabs are living in Israel. 20% of the population of Israel. That's a 1,250% Arab population growth since 1948 in the land of Israel. But let's compare that to what happened in Arab countries. Let's go to the next slide. I think it's easier to see. Let's start on the left. In 1948, there were 265,000 Jews living in Morocco. 2017, there were only 2,000. Algeria went from 140,000 Jews living in Algeria down to 50. Tunisia, 105,000 Jews living in Tunisia in 1948. 2017, 1,700. Libya, from 38,000 to 0. Egypt, from 75,000 to 20. Bahrain, from 1,500 to 35. You go around to all of those countries. You see, the real refugee crisis was all the Jews that were kicked out of Arab states after Israel became a nation in 1948. They were either driven out, kicked out, or they escaped for their lives and they fled. Where did they go? 700,000 Jews went to Israel, the new state. How does a brand new country with no infrastructure, no supermarkets, no food, how does a infant country handle 700,000 refugees? But they did. The Jewish people welcomed their fellow Jews into their fledgling brand new state, and they found a way to make it work. You never hear about the Jewish refugee problem because the Arabs caused the Jewish refugee problem and the Jews solved the Jewish refugee problem. All you hear about is the Arab refugee problem, which was caused by the Arabs, and the Arabs refused to solve it, although they've got unlimited power in Arab oil money and states and nations all around the Middle East to take those refugees and make them citizens of their own country and let them blend into their societies. But the Arabs won't accept the Arabs. They keep them as refugees to score political points against Israel because they blame Israel for causing the problem. The refugee crisis is another problem that is touted on our university campuses with no concept of history whatsoever. Next slide, please. Why is there no peace? On multiple occasions, Israel has tried to give land to the Palestinian Arabs for an independent Arab state, and all the Palestinians have to do is recognize Israel's right to exist and live in peace, and the Palestinians continue to reject every offer. Why? The issue is not land. The issue is not another Palestinian state. The Palestinians don't want land. They don't want an independent state. Their only objective is from the river to the sea. Palestine will be free of Jews. That's why there's a problem in the Middle East. Next slide, please. Now, where is Israel today in God's plan? This was supposed to be tonight's message. I've spoke for 50 minutes. I just want you to know I'm keeping track of it. I really don't need to keep track of that on my watch because I have my wife's eyes. And my wife is giving me the eye that says, are you going to talk all night? Let me point. Yeah, I got to go home with my wife. You don't. Isn't that right? Where is Israel in God's plan? Your pastor read from Romans 11. In Romans 11, the Bible teaches that Israel is blind until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. Notice that statement. The fullness of the Gentiles come in. Where is Israel today? Now, I don't want to leave this place leaving the impression that Israel is the people of God, the apple of God's eye, godly, wonderful people, people that are born again and love Jesus and love God. No, they're not. They're not. As a matter of fact, jump over to those slides that were supposed to be for tonight and get me that picture on slide 3, please. Look at this graph. This is a graph from Pew Research. This is the diverse religious landscape of Israel. The non-Jewish is 19%. This was in 2016, I think. The blue are Jewish Israeli citizens. And you notice there's 4 blocks, shades of blue. The darkest blue is the ultra-Orthodox. The next one is the religious. The next one is the traditional. And the last one is the secular. Now, here's what I want you to notice. Of the 80% of the Israeli citizens who are Jewish people, half of them are seculars. What does that mean? They're atheists. They don't love God. Probably the majority of the Jews that were massacred on October 7th were young Jewish people who are atheists and secularists and have no regard for God. At best, they would be traditionalists that follow some of the practices. Where is Israel in God's plan? Israel is blind. They don't know God. They don't know Jesus Christ. Most of them, the vast majority of them are not saved. There are some saved, but the vast majority are not. But about half of them don't even believe God exists. These are not a wonderful, godly group of people. They've got some of the most, some of the biggest pro-gay marriage, transgender. I mean, they're into all of the yuck that America has been in for the last, this wokeness. A great swath of Israel. They have some of the biggest pride parades. They're blind. They need the gospel, as your pastor was talking about. They need to hear the gospel of Jesus Christ. And thank God for every evangelistic Jewish person or otherwise living in Israel preaching the gospel. It's illegal to present the gospel to anyone under 18 years of age in Israel. You can go to jail if you give a tract to someone under the age of 18 in Israel. But thank God for everyone that's there doing all they can do to share the gospel of Jesus Christ. They are blind and will still be blind until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. Go to slide 4. That's what I just said. They are blind. Where is Israel in God's plan? They're blind. Next slide. They're not only blind, but they're judged. I was speaking this morning from Luke chapter 19, the day Jesus rode into Jerusalem Palm Sunday. A couple days later, he preached the Olivet Discourse. And in the Olivet Discourse, which is where I was going to focus our attention tonight, but time went a different way. But Jesus Christ said of the Jewish people that they are under the judgment of God until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. When the Roman army tore down the temple in 70 AD, and in 136 AD, when Hadrian exiled the Jews from Jerusalem and tore down the city of Jerusalem and renamed their land to Palestine, from that day in 136 years after Christ till 2023, Jesus said, Israel will be under the judgment of God until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. Luke 21:24. Where is Israel in God's plan today? They're blind and they're under the judgment of God. They're under the judgment of God right now. And they will be under the judgment of God until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. But look at the next slide. They will be saved. Your pastor read from Romans 11. Romans 11 talks about when all Israel will be saved. Jeremiah 31 talks about when all Israel will be saved. Matthew 24 talks about when all Israel will be saved. And you know when all Israel is going to get saved? When the fullness of the Gentiles is done. You say, what's the fullness of the Gentiles? You remember Daniel? You remember the image that Nebuchadnezzar saw? The head of gold, the Babylonian Empire, the arms of silver, the Medo-Persian Empire, chest of brass, the Grecian Empire, the legs of iron, the Roman Empire. Those are all Gentile world dominating powers. Babylon ruled the world. Medo-Persia ruled the world. Greece ruled the world. Rome ruled the world. And then there's going to be a confederacy of 10 nations that are going to rule the world. They're a mixture of the strength of iron, Rome, and the weakness of clay. But when God's done with Gentiles ruling the world, there's going to be a rock break off from a mountain. It's a rock that's made without hands. And that rock is going to come flying down to earth. And that rock's going to hit the feet. The last stage of Gentile world dominion. And that whole statue of Gentile world dominion is going to crumble. And the fullness of the Gentiles will be over. And that stone will become a mighty mountain. It'll be the kingdom of the Lord Jesus Christ. And Israel will have her land. And all Israel will get saved. And Jesus will rule the world through Israel from Jerusalem. And the Star of David, we will salute and say the national anthem to the Star of David because Jesus' kingdom will rule the world. Where is Israel in God's plan? Right now she's blind. Right now she's under judgment. But God is working. Since the late 1800s, God's been bringing Jews back to the land. God's been working things out. God's been putting nations into place. God's been shifting power struggles. God's been getting all the pieces, getting everything ready. And it looks, when you look at the world and read the newspaper, it's like you're reading the book of Revelation. And it's gloriously dark. One day, Israel will all be saved. But right now, she's blind. She needs light. She's judged. She needs to be saved. One day, she will be. Oh, listen. Learn history. Learn your Bible. And don't support this crazy world and all of our university campuses and our liberal politicians that are lying to everybody about who Israel is and who the Arabs are. Pastor, Father, thank you for the truth of history, the truth of your word. God, I pray that you'll help us to know truth and to stand for truth and make an influence in the lives of people that we talk to. And we'll thank you for it in Jesus' name.